Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of Coloring Outside the Box. And as I've tried many times to begin this podcast, I feel like my brain is kind of in free fall today. And that's probably because we have some interesting astrological aspects going on. One of them being Moon opposed Neptune, just a little bit of astrology is here, which tends to make things all kind of fade away and melt away just when you think you're focused. And especially since, the moon is in Virgo, which is the same sign the sun is in. So there's that need, to process things, do things properly, and get organized and know what you're doing. And yet Neptune says, you sure you really want that? And this is an interesting segue because really we're heading towards the new moon. And I always describe the new moon as pregnant possibilities. And because the new moon is a birthing process. It's an initiation, it's a beginning. Sometimes it's interesting, we want to think that it's the whole enchilada, that the new moon can bring about everything that we intend. No, all it can do is help us plant the seed. Now, of course, it's interesting because the new moon is in Virgo, which is a harvest sign, at least in the northern hemisphere. So that there is the urge to get a plan, except the new moon is not necessarily about manifestation as much as it's about planting a seed. And then I came across this quote that I think perfectly encapsulates what this particular new moon is about. So I'm going to share it with you. So pardon me while I look over to the side here and read the quote that I wrote down because I didn't memorize it. A measure of freedom is whether you are able to keep the promises you make to yourself. And I think that really says a lot about where we are right now. There's been a lot of talk about freedom, and I don't mean that freedom isn't important, of course it is, but we've really been focused on, the space and the place that we're in, dealing with something that was completely unforeseen and has turned the world upside down. And I've talked about that before. But this particular new moon really is, if you want to begin to put a plan in motion, and I don't mean necessarily an external plan, but an internal plan. It really is about making promises to yourself, because this new moon offers a huge opportunity to do just that, to make new promises to yourself. Now, we often think about promises as things we make to other people, and we don't realize that making promises to ourselves is important and doable. Again, we always think it's about an external thing. So as we move into this new moon, really think about what kind of a promise would you like to make to yourself that you would like to see fulfilled. Not necessarily in this next lunar cycle, because we can get a little caught up in thinking that we have to finish everything that we promise ourselves or that we initiate during this particular cycle. And it's not possible because it depends on how big that promise is. So say you decided you want to promise yourself that you're going to change your eating habits. Well, that's a big promise. It might not sound like a big promise, but it is a big promise because it means changing a lot of your lifestyle. However, if you want to promise yourself that maybe you're going to dance every day, or you're going to stop eating chocolate, or those are things that you can certainly put in practice and know that you can see a result within the lunar cycle. And it's always really interesting because research has shown that if you want to make a change, you have to do the same thing consistently for a minimum of 3 weeks, which is almost a complete lunar cycle. And it's interesting because it actually is highly representative of the phases of the moon from new to the end of the disseminating phase in the beginning of the last quarter. Now, I know I'm talking lunar phases, So I'm just going to quickly tell you what they all are without describing them, and maybe in future podcasts I will start to talk a little bit more about what each of the phases of the moon means and what it might mean about um, how you live your life and how you go deeper into consciousness. Actually, I have a series of webinars that I do on that subject. Anyway, so where was I? I lost my train of thought. So I think that keeping promises to ourselves is a fundamental need. Now, we might not think about it as promises. We might think of it as commitments. We might think of it as intentions. Whatever word works for you. I just like that quote because it really said a lot to me about how we create the sense that we are in charge of our own lives, which is really what freedom is about in so many respects, is being in charge of our own lives. Just going to let that sit there for a second. Because in a time and a space like this, it can feel like there's one thing, and it's a big thing, the pandemic, has changed forever what our notion of freedom is. And I don't think that that's true. I think what it has shown us is that we don't have control. And that is something that humans think is not only desirable, but doable. And yet, if we're paying any attention at all to life, to our lives, to the lives of others, we know that control is an illusion. What we really need to develop is the capacity to respond to life experiences in ways that are healthy and supportive and show strength and integrity. I think that's what we're being called upon to really not just think about, but actually embrace. It's obvious that I don't think that control is desirable or doable, but and the other thing that always I'm kind of getting lost in my own head. It's spinning in circles and going off in several different directions at the same time as I try to formulate what I want to say here. And so before you really resist that idea, and it is hard to accept that control is an illusion, because it's so much a part of the way that we view the world. Because and what I think is it's our desire to be in control and the belief that we can be in control gives us a sense of security, which then gets upended when it turns out not to be true. And right now we're experiencing that in gargantuan terms, not just in, because we're not in it alone. I mean, I know everybody says we're not in this alone, and we're not, because it's happening to the whole planet. The other thing I wanted to say about control is this: it is strongly and directly connected to fear. Now, there are certain kinds of fear that are designed to preserve our physical well-being. And it is important to be clear about what those healthy boundaries are in terms of taking care of ourselves physically. However, right now, I think we're really overcome by an overwhelming fear that we don't know what's happening. Well, we don't, and that's hard. So I want you to really think about that quote, because we can make promises to ourselves. They can be big, they can be small, they can be fun, they can be serious. But make a promise to yourself about something that you really value, about something that really is important to you at this time, about something that you would like to see help your life work better, bring you more joy. Now it can seem that that's a really strange thing to be doing, making promises to ourselves during what is essentially what we often think of as a harvest season. But this is as much about creating an appropriate foundation for moving forward. And this new moon gives us that opportunity. But we need to grasp it consciously, not just go, well, energy seems to be shifting and it's going to all work out in the end. And I don't mean you can't, that there's anything wrong with that, but there also has to be a rooting, a grounding. And that's where the making promises to yourself and actively engaging in what that might mean to you, not just what to do about it, but what it might mean to you. So I want to leave you to think about that and to maybe even meditate on it or go out and garden and think about it, whatever. Again, my brain is doing its usual search and destroy. It feels like in my brain, it's like, yeah, I had a thought and where did it go? Anyway, I just want to say that as much as life seems overwhelming right now, and I know because it does for me, depending on the day or the minute or the hour, I have a lot of hope, but then I am an eternal optimist. This new moon offers us hope. Making promises to ourselves offers us hope because it means we're actively engaged with who we are and where we think we're going. Now that you don't have to have a complete plan, that will develop over time. That's the other part of a new moon in Virgo. Give it an opportunity to develop. It doesn't have to be full blown. It just has to be something that may even be based on something that you've already completed and has given birth to something else, because that's what creativity is and that's what life is. Our experiences give birth to other experiences, give birth to other experiences. So I want to thank you once again for joining me. Stay tuned next week. I will be posting the Libra star track forecast Monday or Tuesday of next week, in which we'll be looking at the planetary energies of what we can expect during the sun's trip through Libra. And if you're not on my mailing list, please go to my website, lesliefrancis.com, and sign up for my newsletter, because in my newsletter, which comes out once a month, when the sun enters a new sign, I am now offering what I call keyword messages for each sun sign for the period of time that the sun is in a particular sign. That sounded long-winded, it was. Anyways, thanks again for joining me. See you next week when I talk about the Libra star track forecast. Toodaloo for now. Bye-bye.